Welcome back to another video on Gearsaw Studios, and today I'm going to be showing you how to build yourself a road network. That way you can actually build your city, and you can see here power lines, street lights, and even multiple lanes along with medians. And because of our street lights using daylight sensors, you can see it works well even at night. So without further ado, let's investigate how we'd actually go about this. And of course, you're going to need a flat area. This one is 401 times 401, as in a little bit much. I'm on 18 render distance to showcase this, so you can see the city will be big enough to accommodate multiple large structures such as nuclear power plants, jails, train tracks, town halls, and maybe even a mall. So let's begin. Go to the center of your area where you want to start your city, something like this, and put a simple 3x3 square. And then we're going to have to determine how far we want the lanes from this. Luckily, the lane's actual size determines this. So we're going to make our lanes 3 blocks wide. So we're going to simulate this right here. What if we have 3 block lanes, and we're going to have 3 of them? And you can see it's already a bit off center. You'll realize how big an intersection is, especially because you need the dividing lines between lanes. So you have to be careful of that. So you can see here, already doing some of that. This is a 4-lane road with medians and corners, so that way there's a sidewalk. And you can see how big it actually gets. We're going to be using andesite and gray concrete powder, both decently easy to get in mass. Make sure to get masons for the andesite, especially if you're doing a whole city. Right here, 3 blocks, the median takes up 3, and of course the median will narrow at the edge of the intersection, where we're going to put a crosswalk. Essentially, you should probably have a photo of a real 4-way intersection by you, so that way you can make it accurate. This time, I've now moved everything so that way it's centered on the very middle of the town plate, which is the beacon. So now we have an interesting question. What blocks do we want to use? Right here, we have 9 options for roads I'd say are decent. All different shades of gray. We have cyan terracotta, all the grays, all the light grays, mud, and of course deep slate. Then for road markers, white concrete powder, white concrete, white wool, yellow, all the shades of yellow including its terracotta, snow, and pale stripped logs work nice. I used a pale stripped logs. Then for the sidewalk really determines what kind of town you have. I'm going for a bit more generic so that way I can make tutorials in this area about how to do more typical structures like hotels. So I chose andesite. Smooth stone is a decent alternative. Anyways, now for our lanes. You can see here, the stripped logs should face the direction traffic should be going. So don't place it sideways, place it forwards whenever you have a long stretch of road. Everything should point towards intersections when possible. So now, let's actually use this. Using some mirroring techniques and some world edit, you can see everything here is being filled in pretty quickly. We have our medians, and I'm trying to calculate how I'd actually make a left turn in this, just to see if I could add road markers in the middle. And I'm just going to tell you this, don't attempt that. It's not going to work. Then we have our lanes. Note, right before an intersection, you can't change lanes. So make sure you have a solid line, about 12-13 blocks. You should also have a 1-block lane on either side of your road for a bike lane. This should not be dotted. I correct this later in the tutorial. So anyways, back into reality, we have ourselves some of the basic stuff. We have the no turn signal area. You can see you can't change lanes. Then let's install a crosswalk. Move the median if you have to, because you don't want to be walking over the median because, well, that could be really annoying. You can modify the median as needed. So we have crosswalks in place, and we also need to have a little bit of markers on the ground. For contrast, I'm using yellow. So right here, I want this to be a left turn only lane. Although in real life that would be a dedicated section, I kinda don't have the room for that in Minecraft. If you try building 100% accurate to real life, you're not gonna have any room for anything. So let's just use a simplified diagram here. You can see we're going to have 2 lanes, one a normal lane and one a left turn lane. And you can see if we try factoring in all the various traffic things, if you try putting markers in the middle and whatnot, you get a mess. The red lines are the straights, and the darker red lines are of course your turnings. And yeah, this gets really out of hand. so you have to be careful about that. So we have the 4-lane intersection, we have the yellow markers as close as I could get to an arrow. I make a better version later on. And we can see how traffic is going to work. If you are in Britain or some other select countries that drive on the left side of the road, shown here, make sure that everything you do in this tutorial is inverted, so that way it's actually accurate to your traffic laws. Remember, I'm building based off of my region's traffic laws, so something might look different compared to yours. Of course, don't use this to try and locate me, but still, you should look in Google Maps to see your local road networks. Very easy to use that, and that way you can get accurate measurements and see how your streets are actually laid out. Anyways, traffic signs. You can see they're just cyan terracotta overhangs. You don't actually need a thicker base for them. In fact, I find them to be annoying. Here, we're just going to do our traffic lights. So you can see here, just a bunch of different patterns, different techniques, and now we have ourselves our green lights and our red lights. Yellow lights can easily be made off of pausing on the loom section, and you can use any other different colors of lights in case you live in an area which has more than just red, yellow, green. Anyways, for our crosswalk signals, a button, and then a sign to show a pedestrian. The symbols vary region by region. So I used a white candle and upside down redstone dust to symbolize start and stops. So of course, every state or really country, anything just has a different symbol, so make sure to look in your local area or make up your own. So now with our new yellow arrows, we have our straight or go right symbols. We have a completed 4-way intersection here. It is pretty functional, missing all of its beauty things such as the medians having plants, but still, let's continue this outward. You can see that a road is easily expandable. You can do this endlessly. And as you build the road, you'll notice that you'll eventually have to make intersections, because of course cities have city blocks, and if you go too long on one line, it's just going to get stale, especially if you need a parking lot. Right here, because I wanted to build a town hall at a later date, I made a T, or a 3-way intersection. Notice how we have standalone crosswalks, with our dedicated symbols for don't go yet. And remember where the traffic lights actually need to go. Since there are turn lanes, because you can't go straight here from one direction, make sure to accommodate everything for that as well. Additionally, our medians are 2 blocks thinner here and do not have plants. You'll have to get used to varying sizes of roads. Not all areas are going to be 4 lanes with 2 for each side. Some might only have 1 lane for one direction, and others might be 6 lanes, so keep that in mind. Everything shown here should be decently accurate though. So now, let's build our varying intersections to really make city blocks for this place. We are going to run into an interesting idea. What if we want a train track for this? So of course, they enable you to build a train and a railroad, all the things that trains usually do, so we need to actually lay that out. Let's start with a simple 9-block wide thing of, let's say, blackstone. Of course, it gets changed to tough later, and then of course the rails get attached and a whole bunch of things. And this should stretch across your whole town, because, well, trains. Although you could make it end at a train station and have a little loop-de-loop in the track. Although, don't quote me on that, I'm not a train specialist, unfortunately. Either way, you can see here a long line of tough, and we have an area where the tracks can split. I do not recommend actually making tracks go across the split, because making diagonal tracks in Minecraft is really just not feasible, so I'd recommend avoiding that unless absolutely necessary. But anyways, we have this whole train area, and anytime a road goes over it, replace it with polished andesite. Now, time-lapse time. We can see it's pretty simple to build this. We have some things of deep slate bricks running across. They're not actually meant to be stairs. I end up changing them to slabs, and there will be 1 block above. So you can see they're on the tough, and they have dark oak stripped logs lining them. And then, for an outline, I include a bunch of gravel going like this, to give it a more graffiti-like look. Over here, you can also build a train stopper in case you wanted to build an intersection and failed. So that way you always have that escape route in case you wanted to try it. Then, in the middle, we have sideways deep slate, in order to add that final darker layer of the stones. So with all that, and of course tough in the middle, polished tough specifically for our main sections, we have ourselves a completed railway. So now we just need to accommodate the road for it. Add some thick stop lines like this for oncoming traffic. That way they don't accidentally fly into the train, because unfortunately that does happen decently often. Then, using our schematics we used for the traffic lights, we should create a same thing for the railroad crossing, and then some barriers that go down to make sure nobody tries flying past the red lights. So you can see, did precisely that. We have ourselves some pale and mangrove shelves to be the things that come down. And then we have ourselves a rudimentary traffic light. We even have a cobweb here to symbolize that X marker for railroad crossing. So now, with this and some mangrove buttons on top of the traffic light looking thing, we have ourselves a more safe railway. That way, nobody can accidentally go around this. If you still go around it, that's kind of your fault now. So, you're not liable for anything that happens there anymore. So, let's continue building. Right here, we also have a little thing that we can add. Anytime you have an area where you're not at an intersection and need to get into somewhere, like a parking lot, we can split the median, so that way you can make that left or really just always left-hand turn. Make sure it's kind of blade shaped like this in order to make it obvious which direction it's going. Of course, invert if you are in a left-hand driving country. Anyways, on either side of this, you can make gaps in the road, the sidewalk, and replace them with more smooth andesite, or potentially some of the gray. So now, right here, we have ourselves, just more functional of a road, and you can see the edges are now marked with smooth sandstone. This is to simulate the yellow, but of course we don't have yellow concrete slabs. Now for right here, we have another game to play. How do we do an intersection between wildly different road shapes? So here's how we can do it. We just simply make the intersection as wide as we need for the widest section, and then we attach a smaller road to it. So right here, you can see I did precisely that. Another basic traffic intersection, and this part goes right into a neighborhood. Of course, neighborhood tutorial coming, probably not for a long time. But anyways, we have ourselves the lines, and you can see a 2-lane road can now safely connect to a 4-lane. So we have all that in place. Now, for another game we can play, we have ourselves a lane that splits, or merges, depending on which direction you're going. It goes from 3 to 4. So when you do this, it's pretty simple. You just make the center lane keep going as the bike lane hugs the edge, and eventually a new lane pops out from it. It's a pretty simple concept. Now you can see here, we have our split lanes, and they are looking quite good. You can see how we have the bike lane and a 6-lane road. Although I would never ride a bike lane here, still, we have ourselves connected to this massive road. You can see it's multiple lanes and has an extra median. This is called a frontage road, and I have one near my house. And this allows you to get into businesses on the side of massive roads, so that way there's less struggle. Using all this, we can actually assemble a pretty interesting road system. Where we have a normal 4-lane here, we can assume this is a pretty fast road, and then we have an area where we can slow down on the frontage road. Make gaps at the intersection so that way people can actually access this second road. So you can see here, standardized everything. We have our traffic signs, and we have our frontage roads being properly separated but still accessible. So now we can put storefronts along there at a later date. And because of all this, our road system is effectively done. We do need to add a few extra things though. So let's go over here in this back corner. What about a parking lot? And parking lots are often pretty difficult to do in Minecraft, especially depending on what you do for your car size. Personally, I'm thinking somewhere in the ballpark of 6 to 7 blocks, but still. Let's shave off the sidewalk, and you can see here, we just need to make this area accessible. Then, we need to put in a big thing of gray concrete powder, road texture, and a building just to simulate this condition. So now, we have our hypothetical building. What's it for? Good question. I don't know. It is a solid mass of bricks, and let's say this is very important. Let's make parking spots, and you can do them along the edge, like this. I'd recommend actually doing these horizontal if you copy this pattern. The spacing can vary, And remember, you might have to modify the size of your parking lot to accommodate for your parking spaces. Maybe do the spaces before actually doing the parking lot size, so that way you can align everything and make it look good rather than being trapped inside this box. Anyways, I take the simple solution. It's not super accurate, but just adding a grid there works wonders, and you can potentially spice it up with some street lamps later, although I leave it as is for the rest of the tutorial. If you have them pressed up against the entrance, remember to add road signs, such as the handicap sign and its text on it, like "No parking here, you'll get a big fee." So do that all across the build as well if you want those little details. I actually don't add road signs to this simply because I forgot. But anyways, we have that done. So let's add in the rest of the things you see near the road. We already have our crosswalks, our traffic stops, our signs, well, if we had any. Now we need power lines. This is pretty simple. There's a bunch of designs, but I'm going for one that, of course, resembles more true to life, even if it's less flashy. This pillar with a gray concrete bottom, and then goes up cyan and has 2 spikes on it. These will be connected with chains. Space these about 15 blocks apart. I did 16, and this actually worked out pretty badly for me, because I wanted to add lamps between them, but I also wanted benches, and benches just weren't happening with this, so be very careful. If your thing changes the lane sizes like this, maybe omit these power lines, because it could get really out of hand really quick, although if you're brave, you can certainly add it. Then, we can also add birds to this. This can be remarkably difficult though, because parrots are, kind of hard to move, and none of these look very accurate unless you're in the jungle, or you can do the green parrot only. Because the difficulty in doing this, maybe only add 1 or 2, or maybe a few more in creative. You can't actually have a realistic number of birds though for lag reasons, so just leave it at a few of these and keep it consistent. They're just here and maybe a few other spots. Then, these orange things, I actually don't know what they are. Represent them with red sandstone. So put these around. I really don't know why they're there, but they're accurate and they break up some of the monotony of the chains. So now we have power lines, and they're, still pretty basic. We do have our medians and we have our lampposts still remaining. So let's take a look. I actually wanted to go for something more traditional, but if you want modern, here's a design I made a long time ago. I recommend substituting some of these blocks out for tuff because of course we have andesite sidewalks, and make them a bit taller. Ultra frog lights with some stairs holding them. They're not the most interesting, kind of like in real life. And because I know our world is kind of square now in real life, and doesn't really have much flair anymore, I decided let's go for something a bit more classy. Right here we have wood, and you can see gray concrete to cyan terracotta to 2 tough brick walls to a dark oak plank to a redstone lamp to a inverted daylight sensor. So now we have street lamps, and they will actually turn off during the day to conserve power. So hooray! We have ourselves an actually functional system there. Then we can take an aerial view, how they speckle the whole place, turn it to night, and they all enable right at the same time, which is a fantastic sight to see. This actually makes our city feel like a place where it's not just for spectacle, but you could potentially build a mega basin. Of course, where would you put that? I'm not entirely sure. But still, we have ourselves everything except the medians. And here's the thing. The traffic stops have the lime concrete there in order to represent a road marker. Even though I didn't really mention it, might just be a regional thing. Unfortunately, you can't place a sign on there, so we don't know which places are streets and which ones are avenues if you use that directional system. So I decided to make the medians do that. East to west has these normal ones with pink petals between. Mud brick to 3 spruce fences to a simple ball of leaves, dark oak specifically. And then anything going north to south has cherry, and that is done with nether brick wall to 3 nether brick fences surrounded with cherries. Put in flower arrangements and azaleas between in order to spice it up. I recommend not putting any sort of firefly bushes or particle emitters here. So now we have all that, and we just have this long outer median. This one I actually just fill up with a bunch of roses because I like flower arrangements. So now with all that, we are going to have a completed road system. You can see here, we have ourselves, just a simple road system. It's functional for all of your city-based needs, has proper lighting, and it even has some landscaping. And with that, it's the end of today's video. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, it really helps me out. I'm trying to improve the editing quality, and over the summer, I'm going to be expanding the city with a wide selection of builds, so that way you can follow along. Either way, enjoy the rest of your day. Gearsaw out.